Welcome to the Books Between Friends podcast.
3 lifelong friends,
one shared obsession.
Books.
From epic fantasy to page-turning thrillers.
We dive into the stories we love
And the ones we just can't stop talking about.
So take a seat,
Grab a drink,
and get cozy. Welcome back, friends. We're so excited to dive into part 3 of Onyx Storm, where we will discuss chapters 13 through 18. If you didn't catch our first 2 episodes of Onyx Storm, go listen to it now, then come back and join us for this episode. Speaking of cozy, what's your cup of cozy today? Tonight, I decided to go with a cup of coffee. And yes, it's coffee because I'm a little tired and I need to stay awake. Steph, what's your cup of cozy?
So I was going to start off with water, but it's just one of those days. So I went ahead and poured myself another glass of my classic black box Cabernet.
See, you can't go wrong there. You really can't. You really can't. So I also am drinking some Cabernet. That seems to be my go-to red. It is not the black box though. I forget the brand, but it almost looks like the Game of Thrones label.
Ooh.
Right, but it's not, and that's probably why I got it. I was like, this looks fantasy-like. Let's pick it up.
You shop for wine like I do, just based purely on the label.
Don't judge a bottle of wine by its label.
As David says.
Yeah, that's a great scene of Schitt's Creek.
Yes, I love that scene.
I don't watch Schitt's Creek, so I don't know.
Oh my God, you're missing out.
Oh dear, that's our next goal. That's our next goal.
I think you would like it, Steph.
Okay, I was about to say I think I started it and didn't like it, but that was Scandalous or something like that, or Scandal. I can't remember.
Scandal?
Scandal.
Yeah.
That's Scandal. Scandal's a lot. But what you said is also true of like everyone that watches Schitt's Creek. Like they say like, oh, I started it 2 episodes. You got to get past the first 2.
You really do. It's so good.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe I'll give it another shot.
We're doing our very famous rambling now, so let's
move on.
Yeah, let's get this going. So before we get started, fair warning, once again, if you're listening to this episode, we're assuming that you've read chapters 13 through 18 of Onyx Storm. So there will be spoilers throughout this episode. Now, before diving into the next 6 chapters, let's catch up to where we are in Onyx Storm so far. Violet and her squad pulled off the impossible. They altered the wardstone so that the Flyers could stay at Biscayeth. And thanks to some perfect timing, the Cenarium couldn't do anything to punish them because they had already signed off on their pardons by the time they found out. Daddy Atos is now the general of Biscayeth, giving him even more power over Violet and her squad. And he's already taking advantage of that power to make their lives hell. Violet has discovered that Andarna is an irid scorpion tail, but they still have to find the rest of her kind so that they can restore Orisha's wards before they completely fail. And time is also running out for Xaden. While fighting on the front, he slipped up and channeled again. To further complicate things, because why not? Apparently, some Venin have signets now. And there's a silver-haired sage named Theophany, who's also a lightning wielder and is hunting down Violet and Andarna. But why?
We finally get more answers in these few chapters. It may not be all the answers we're seeking, but after reading them, it's starting to give me hope that Violet is truly on the right track. I also love just how much Violet is really trusting herself and her instincts because she knows just how much is riding on the mission she's on. I can't wait to get more into this. Now let's deep dive into chapters 13 through 18. So I am really upset with the fact that Jasenia is being punished for helping Violet and her friends. Like, I think of course, that shouldn't surprise me because Markham is in charge of the Scribe Squadron, right? But I'm really upset because Jasenia is such a hard worker and she's just trying to do what's right. And she's being punished for it. Like, what the heck?
Right. Even during this chapter, I wrote out to the side, and for those listeners that just kind of gasped that I write in my books, which I do, they're mine. I can do whatever I want with them. But I wrote to the side at this part, I was like, I just love Jasenia. She's a badass in her own right,
Yeah,
right? Like, and I
totally.
also feel like we're kind of she's the character that kind of echoes what Violet could have been, right? Like this is the side where we see what the possibilities could have been for Violet had she been a scribe. But seeing the way that Jasenia is standing her own ground, even though, she's deaf, right? Jasenia is totally capable of holding her own ground. And she's like, no. And she owns the decisions that she made. She's like, no, I owned this. And this just so happens to be the punishment. And you kind of see that come out a little bit more when she kind of side-eyes Sawyer for revealing the information that she didn't want revealed. She was like, no, that wasn't your information to share, so back off, please. Like, I'm me, let me do me.
I forgot that little interaction between them.
Yes.
Yeah, I was also so disappointed to hear that she's taking some heat for, wasn't she the only scribe that chose to leave Biscayeth with them? And you're right, Ethan. She has always been ride or die for Violet and has been helping her like continue her research this whole time. She's also on the side of truth, like Violet has been this whole time. So, obviously it's not a surprise that they decided to punish her in this way when she's back at Biscayeth, but it just sucks to see that happen to her because obviously she's a great scribe and she's, in the spirit of what scribes are in my head meant to do, like they seek the truth and they keep the knowledge so that, future generations can learn from it. It's just disappointing to see that there's this whole network of people who are trying to suppress that.
I know. And honestly, I love that she's still continuing to help. Like she's trying to gather as much information as possible on Andarna's kind. And I love her little sarcasm with Riddick when she was like, of course I found the tome that describes her seventh breed. I have it right here. And Riddick's like, really? Really? And I was laughing.
And
so sarcastic.
Yes, and then he even looks at Violet, like I can just see it, like puppy dog mentality, right? Like he's so excited,
available.
Right? Violet, can you believe it? We found it. We found the answer. And then Violet just looks at him like, and it even says that Violet like scrunches her nose at him, like, no, she's pulling your leg.
I was cracking up because I was like, and they just send you had it in her to sarcastically sign. It was so funny.
Yeah.
But her and Violet did end up coming to a realization that they feel like they know who has the research on Andarna's kind. And unfortunately, it's Violet's dad, which made me really excited because then as soon as I saw this, I was like, yes, we get to know more about her dad because we really didn't get to know a lot about him in these last two books.
Yeah, I remember Jen texting you, like, even in the first book, like, I want to know more about her dad. How did he actually die? What did he actually know about Venin or this war? So I'm glad we're getting there finally.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something that we mentioned in our Iron Flame episode where, we got to know more of General Soaring Gale, even though it was just a glimpse. And I remember saying, like, making the connection between that and, Dumbledore dying in book 6 and saying, but it was still like Dumbledore was there in book 7 because now Harry is having to analyze the biography that came out about him. And I feel like that's what we're getting here now with
yes,
with the potential to learn more about Violet's father.
I hate that the research though is hidden in her mom's like old office, which is now Daddy Atos' office, and it's warded, so only blood can go through it, which means now Violet has to trust Dane to get this research. That's a lot of trust to put in a guy that broke your trust.
Yeah, you're still rebuilding that relationship. But, earlier, was it in our last episode, we talked about how Dane is really redeeming himself. He's really showing that he's on their side. He's here to help them out. He's, trusting Violet more unconditionally than he was in the first book. So, this is going to be a true test of that. Where do your loyalties actually stand, Dane? And there's even a moment where, Violet realizes that this could also be Dane's opportunity to get back on his dad's good graces after his dad kind of disowned him, right? So that really kind of leaves you hanging in the balance of like, what's he going to choose to do? Is he going to choose Violet or is he going to choose his dad? So that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh, but I mean, thankfully, Violet's not the only one. Violet and her squad are not the only one preparing or trying to gain more research and learn more history about the Venom and trying to figure out Indarna's kind. Like Devera is also putting, I think, a lot of effort into that, and so is the War College. I don't think it comes a lot from Atos, to be honest. Like I don't think Daddy Atos cares that these cadets are prepared, clearly, since they hid all this truth from everyone. But I think that it's coming from the professors who do care. And I love that Devera is still one of those professors that cares, because she comes prepared to the next battle brief with all rewritten history books. And it's all the things that flyers all know. Like they know this history. The flyers are well prepared to face off. They may not be as powerful when it comes to their magic like the dragon riders are, but they know the history of the Venom. And so now the writers need to catch up. And I love that, they're taking Battle Brief more seriously now. They're definitely talking about real threats that are out there, and they're not keeping, I think, everyone in the dark. But honestly, I was a little surprised at the new class that they introduced, which I don't know, maybe it wasn't as surprised, but I was actually excited to hear that they were going to spar with their signets and that a new professor was going to be introduced.
I wonder who it could be.
I mean, who is the
Well,
most
obviously
powerful?
we needed to like progress the relationship. So obviously we had to find a way to get Xaden back into the picture. But yeah, I am so glad that there's still professors at Biscayeth that are interested in the cadets' well-being and like actually being prepared for what's waiting out there for them, you know? So the two texts that they get are a copy of How to Defeat Venom and then a book on runes. And so, yeah, to your point, Jen, the Flyers have been taught this in their college.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what it's called, but in Poor Meal. And they've been fighting Venom for centuries now. They've been using runes to their advantage. So, unfortunately at Biscayeth, they haven't been teaching this to cadets in the Writers' Quadrant and really crippling their entire army that's supposed to be fighting against Venom, which is insane. So obviously there are still people who want to make sure that they have the best shot possible at defeating the common enemy, which is Venom. And they also did take the time to investigate and confirm that yes, some Venom do have signets and they need to be prepared for that. They also, up until this point, have not been teaching to spar against someone else with a signet because, why would that happen if there's no Venom? Like everyone with a signet is going to be on your side, allegedly. Turns out that's not the case. So they need to
True.
be
And
prepared for what's out there.
Right.
that's true.
At this point, though, like, yes, it is so great that they're finally starting to get with the program and say, hey, we have to face reality here. But at the same time, you can still realize that there's some red tape that even the professors that want to help still have to abide by because, yes, they did confirm the signets, but it also took them 10 days to officially confirm it, right? So there's still factors against them going into that. But all of that leads up to this wonderful reveal of this new class, right? And who is going to be the one teaching said class of learning how to wield your signets, to against someone else that also has a signet. So
This new professor that we're about to reveal, I mean, you all know because you've read it, but I'm really glad that it's not Carr. I feel like going back to when Violet started, just, sidetrack for a second, but, back when Violet went to Orisha and started training with Felix, like he was more interested in growing her power and, making sure that it was more precise and better wielded on the field, in battle and on the field, instead of Carr seeing how many strikes she could pull within it, however many minutes or whatever. I don't think he was interested in growing her power at all because I think Har was actually scared of Violet. So I was so glad and relieved to hear that somebody else was going to be taking over something like that because I feel like Har just did such a poor job doing that.
Well, okay, so I feel like I'm going to become a broken record and y'all are going to get so annoyed with me. Like, just the way that the writers have been trained up until this point really makes me question the motives of leadership that is in control of them. You should be asking, why was Carr not training Violet to hone her power, to control it? You know, it's so dangerous to have all this power and not know how to control it. And why would they not want her to if they're not trying to set her up for failure? And why would they do that if they're not Venin? I'm just saying, I'm going to be harping on this point. I just feel like there are ulterior motives at play here that just keep leading me down that path.
No, I'm like picking up what you're putting down lately on all these episodes. Like, oh yeah, that seems to be the storyline that makes a lot of sense, right?
Well, yeah, why else would they hide it? I mean, people hide their faults for a reason, and they're hiding this huge secret. And now that it's out, they're still trying to find a way to control it. So I can see where your train of thought is going. So I think Violet was both relieved and upset that this new professor came to light, because I know that she's been really worried about said person, which is of course Xaden. She's been really worried about.
Say it now. I think it's official.
It's
Xaden is your professor.
Because she's been so worried about him, because you know he was away. They sent him back to the front, right? And he was away for only a few days, and he accidentally channeled again. And so the more he's away from being protected under the wards, the more she's worried. And so now that he's back at Biscayeth under the protection of the wards, I know she's feeling a lot of relief. But at the same time, everybody is still being held to the Codex. And so according to the Codex, Article 8, Section 1, they prohibit relationships between cadets and professors. So now she's like, okay, I'm really happy he's here safe, but now I can't date my boyfriend that I'm in love with. Now they have to be apart again.
You know what was so funny is in that moment when she realized at the same time, like, Xaden is safe, but shit, he's gonna be my professor now, technically. She cited that exact article of the Codex in her head.
I love how that was like the first thought too.
And that was her first thought, because again, Violet being Violet is always going to do the right thing. And she mentally tells Xaden, I think our relationship just ended. And he immediately was like, absolutely not.
No, that's not a thing that's going to be happening.
Xaden, would you be like, well, yeah, baby, you're right. No, we have to make sure we break up and follow the Codex. Xaden has never cared about the Codex. Like, he's been really good about following the Codex when he needs to follow it, but obviously he's been breaking the rules since the minute he stepped into the writer's
secretly this whole time.
Of course, he doesn't care about the dang Codex. But I feel like the only reason Violet cares is because she's afraid of the consequences of leadership, right? She's not, I don't think, that afraid of like, oh, I'm breaking the rules. It's like, what are they going to do to us? Because look what happened with Varish.
Right,
exactly.
Right.
And they need to keep him at Biscayeth and safe under the wards.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah. I also love that this chapter is where Xaden fills in some of the holes that his letter to Violet saying that, he needed to rest, but obviously that was a cover for that he's channeled again, like we said earlier, but now he's providing more context to that now that he's actually here with Violet and he can tell her these things. And he reveals that his dragon Sigale spoke to him while he was channeling, and he like kind of lost himself for a moment. And when she spoke, he's like, actually, she yelled at me. It jarred me out of it. And so this goes back to my prediction that I had made in a previous episode, but I feel like that kind of has more merit now, just because it's obvious that she still cares about him, and that she obviously, right, like she yelled at him to stop, to bring him back. And so still think and holding on firmly to the belief that she is cutting off herself and communication from him, not because she doesn't still love him and care about him, but because she's trying to protect herself, and therefore also trying to protect the bond between her and Taryn, and then connection Taryn and Violet, right? I think that's why Taryn has been saying you need to cut off connection with him as well. Like, let's all take an example from Sigale. This is dangerous for all of us.
I mean, yeah, can you
think about that? That's crazy.
Can you imagine being linked to, as Taryn likes to call him, the Dark One, and just being on the precipice of always like channeling from the source and potentially turning more and more evil, right? and killing you. Because I mean, that's exactly what freaking Jack Barlow did. He killed his own dragon because he got to the point where he knew he didn't care about his dragon anymore, and he didn't need the dragon anymore because he was, he just wanted the power right from the source. And so I can totally see why she would want to do that.
So Eidos, when they asked for what do they call it? An exception to that rule on professors and cadets being romantically involved. Eidos tells him the only reason you're here is because it's on orders from Melgren. And I've always gone back and forth on like where does Melgren's loyalties lie? Because there's moments, where he kind of seems to be on the side of Orisha and the revolution. Like when he came to them in Orisha asking for help in that battle at Samara, he could foresee, he's got that foresight that they were going to lose against Venin there. And, if he wasn't in support of the revolution, why would he go to Orisha for help? But he did. And again, Sorengale, General Sorengale, when she was still alive, came along with him to ask for their support. And now we know where her loyalties have lied this whole time. So,
well, I think Milgrain is a lot like her, where he needs to be cold when it's appropriate, right? He needs to be this cold person that, shows that he doesn't care, just like General Sorengale did. Because, I mean, for years, Violet thought that her mom didn't care about her. And so he has to be that person because he's the most powerful. He is one of the most powerful, or he has one of the most powerful dragons. And so I feel like that kind of just has to fit into his persona because of that. But I think that he cares. I mean, would you want to be responsible for all those lives, knowing that you have the signet to be able to foresee if you can stop, the outcome of a battle or change the outcome of a battle?
So now we get to Violet's first meeting with the task force, who is assigned to try to find the seventh breed of dragon. And it's not going well, you guys. Grady clearly has no clue what the heck he's doing. He's taking them in the complete opposite direction from where Violet knows in her gut they should be going. And he hasn't taken into consideration any of her choices for the crew that was going to be assigned to the task force. So he's had Aura, which is that wing leader who challenged Dane a few chapters back, assigned to the task force. Her and Violet obviously have no love between each other. And then Halden, Prince Halden, is also going to be part of the task force, which is her ex who cheated on her 3 years ago. And then everybody else on the task force are other writers that she doesn't know, can't be sure if they can be trusted or not. So it's just all starting off on a bad foot.
Wasn't it the Scenarium who put together this task force?
Well, they appointed Grady as the leader, and he chose everybody who's going to be part of the task force.
Yeah.
So you get this guy who he was the professor that was in charge of like the
RSC class last year.
right, which had to do with torture, and he was the sole professor who used the serum on the cadets to cut them off from their bond with their dragons and from their power. So you have this person in charge of the most important task ever of finding the seventh breed and putting together some shitty ass people that he thinks is good. I don't understand how he chose these people, but I mean, if you're gonna consult anybody on who should be on this task, it should be Violet. Like we're looking for one of her dragon's breeds, knowing that it could damn well save everyone in Navarre, and you're not even going to consult her.
There's so much pettiness going on. Like they're so petty that it's going to kill them all. Like they can't even, I'm sorry, she's just a cadet. This cadet's not in charge here. I don't give a damn. Like she is the key to your survival basically because she is bonded to Andarna, right? Like that's the big picture here that everyone is missing, or at least all the leadership is missing. And it was so frustrating to read all of this and for like not Xaden and Violet just to like go in and kill everyone and just have their own task force.
Truly.
That's another thing. It's like, not only why aren't you consulting Violet because of the whole Indarna thing? Why aren't you consulting Violet because she is the most powerful writer? I don't care that she's a second year. Have you seen what she can do with her lightning? Like, come on. And then pettiness, like more pettiness comes when they're trying to make sure that Xaden doesn't get involved because he's what do they call it? A separatist? And they're like, well, we don't need a separatist on this. And she was like, well, you already have one, me.
She was so quick with that comeback. I loved it. And then Xaden also stepped in and shut him up pretty quick with like, obviously they can't separate Sigale and Terran. So your point is moot. There is no discussion here. Xaden is part of the task force, and end of conversation. They didn't even invite him to that first meeting. He came late, and I'm assuming because Violet let him know that it was happening, he wasn't officially invited to it.
I forgive you for not inviting me.
Right.
It was his line. I loved that line. I underlined it and everything.
And then Xaden pointed out to Grady that, you know, when he went through his list of who all he assigned to the task force, Xaden pointed out to Grady, why do we have no shields? Why do we have, you know, people who are going to actually be useful on this task force? And then he pointed out, you know, he oversees Tyrandor, and Mira is assigned to Arisha right now. You know, he can have her move to the task force at any point in time. And then thankfully, Mira is someone that Violet had also named as part of her picks for the task force. So, you know, at least she's got Xaden on her side to advocate for what they need in this mission.
I also think like their line of thinking about where to start the mission, which clearly shows high ignorance. Like, you're not thinking here, you're leading with ego, which is something I've mentioned before. They want to go northward to the Emerald Sea where nobody ever makes it out alive. Like, why would you want to set up this task force for failure already? Like, do you want to send everybody to go get killed? Is that what this is? Like, you're just trying to get rid of Violet in this way where it's like, oh, let's get rid of the two headaches, Xaden and Violet, and let's go get them out, you know, killed out in the Emerald Sea. Like, no, how about we research like Violet's been doing and go to the obvious, which is the South, because that's where a lot of the research is hinting at, you know, but I guess nobody's as smart as her.
Right.
Well, it just makes me question once again their motives towards Violet and Xaden.
Yeah.
They're two most powerful weapons in this war against Venin. Why would they want to lead them astray into the wrong direction on this extremely important mission for the entire continent, you know? And like, they didn't even ask Violet until that meeting. Someone else on the task force, not Grady, asked Violet after he had already made his statement, we're going north. I can't remember who it was that asked her. One of the other writers that she doesn't really know that well asked her where she would go, and then she mentioned south. So they're not interested in her opinion or her research at all.
No. But I do love how during this whole thing, Violet and Xaden are having their own internal conversation. And boy, are they thirsty for one another. Like, that's very clear. It's very obvious. And so they're having some actual conversation that is pursuant to the task at hand. But then they're also, you know, having their flirtatious moments. But one thing that does come out of that is the reveal more of her father's research, right? He says, I don't know the contents of Dad's research, but I do remember him suddenly going secretive within about 6 months before he died. And I wrote like to the side of that, have we known that before? Like, have we known that detail that he's gone secretive with his research months before he died? Because I felt like that was the first time we read it. And if she knew that already, why is this the first time we're thinking about that? Like, that's kind of like, that would have been good to know before I don't think it would have spoiled anything, but I feel like that's probably pretty important to the plot, but I just thought it was weird. And also somewhere in this chapter, we hear his first name, which I don't think it had ever registered in my brain before.
Well, she's never mentioned his name. This is the first we're hearing of it, that his name is Asher. Yeah. This is the first we're hearing that his name is Asher. I do remember thinking, like, back when I was reading, it might have been the first book, whenever they mentioned Violet's father passing, I kept questioning the death. I was like, there's a reason he died. There's absolutely no way it had to do with Brennan, dying. Like, there's no way that his heart just gave out. Like, especially since he was this really smart scribe. I think she mentions, Ethan, that he started acting weird towards the end. And that's
So
where
I think it was actually in the second book. So back in the first book, I also started questioning the circumstances of his death,
Right.
just because like there was already hints that had to do with him and his research, but I don't think she ever explicitly said he started acting weird at a certain point in time. But in the second book, you remember Daddy Atos asked her about his dad's research specifically. And I think that's the moment when she did mention something to him about it being secretive or, classified possibly. But I don't think she ever said that anything was weird around the time of his death. But yeah, I think there was a little bit of breadcrumbs throughout, like starting with the first book. But I think this is the first time where she explicitly says something's weird going on around that time frame.
I should have done it like you, Stephanie, where like there wasn't much time between me reading Iron Flame and Onyx Storm because it has been a while.
Before we get more into like her father's research, I do love that we finally kind of get to see a little scene of Xaden teaching his first class. And I was like all for it. That was so good.
Good teacher.
He is a good teacher. Okay. I mean, I'd be a great student if he was my professor.
Oh,
I don't know about that, but we can move on.
I do love how, of course, it had to be someone who challenged him. Like, what makes you think that you can be our teacher? Like, are you kidding me, dude? Are you serious? Of course, nobody knows about the fact that he can read everyone's intentions and can put everyone in their ass. But, he still is a pretty powerful writer, even without that. And so I enjoyed reading about how he put everyone on their ass.
That was so funny. So it was a Navarian writer, or maybe it was like a group of Navarian writers during that first class that were like snickering to each other about something. And so Xaden asked them what they're talking about. And so one of them speaks up and says, like, are you really qualified to teach us if you've only graduated a year ago? And like, the absolute audacity to ask a shadow wielder, the only shadow wielder in Navarre, like one of the most powerful signets that has ever existed.
Yeah.
It's just hilarious.
Yeah.
And so he puts him on his ass right away.
Yes, absolutely. I was like, he puts them in their place time and time again. That first sparring was just the first of many, right? And we see, like, I almost picture it like someone in a boxing ring and them flying out of the ring itself, like into the stands, and then you see these cartoon like clouds with arms and like bang pow, like all over like an old school cartoon. Again, you still hear some internal monologue going between Xaden and Violet, and they're having more flirtatious moments. But the line that I like out of this section the most is towards the end of the chapter, where the sparring is kind of settling down a little bit, and they're still giving him a little bit of pushback, but not much. Like they're starting to see, like, oh, all right. Of course, it's all because they just had their asses handed to them, but there's still that little bit of pushback. And he tells them, he's like, I want you to learn not just from me, but from one another. I'll help expose the weaknesses in your signet so that when you come up against a dark wielder with such a power, you will have already practiced how to defeat them. Each of you has something to learn, and I'm here to keep you safe while you do it. And I think that is such like a good teacher, like Mr. Feeney moment. If Mr. Feeney taught at a war college, like that's something that he would say to his students. And so I think that was like the perfect way to bring this chapter to a close. Just him like, I'm really here for you and I want you to succeed. So let's do that together rather than against each other.
Totally.
I know, I do love that. He's so good. But I will say, the scene that really had me like sitting at the edge of my seat, I was like, yes, okay, I can't wait to see this, was when he finally calls Violet.
I know. I was just like also on the edge of my seat, Jen, waiting. Like he was clearly saving her for last, save the best for last.
You save the most powerful, and of course his lover for last, right?
So that was good. And then her response was perfect. I thought, she said, "Do me a favor and don't let me hurt you."
Right? I loved that. She
So
said
cute. Yeah.
she said she opened the door to Taryn's power, and I almost like I could picture it and almost hear it like as she stepped into the ring, like thunder rumbling in the distance, right? And she's having like her true Storm from X-Men moment.
Yeah.
As she steps into the ring,
I love
like
that.
it gave me all the feels.
I love that. I kind of hate how it ends though, because I feel like that's foreshadowing what's going to happen down the book or even in later books. But so it just makes me so sad.
Yeah.
So Xaden, of course, he uses the shadows and he makes the place completely dark, which I love that he took advantage of that to kiss her because they haven't been able to have like a moment together because everybody's watching to make sure that they don't break codex, right? So of course he has to sneak in a kiss in there. But he's pushing her to have her really hone in on their bond. He was like, find me, look for me, feel the bond, follow the bond. And so, he's really pushing her to be able to track him. And, he keeps telling her, it's just you. It's just you. He says, you need to be able to find me. And then, of course, Violet's like, why only me? And he leaves the class and she asks him again, like, why only me? And he responds with, because you're the only one capable of killing me. And I was like, no. Oh, that that killed me. I was like, no, 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 it cannot be. Like, she can't. He's right though. She is the only one that's capable of killing him. I mean, not only can she track him down the bond, but she's a lightning wielder and she's been able to kill Venom with her lightning. And so I can understand where he's coming from, where he's trying to set up like a security, kind of thing for in case he does turn full Venom. But I hate that that's his line of thinking. I hate that he's thinking that far ahead because he feels like that is where he's going to inevitably go,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like it's a bit of foreshadowing coming through, but I totally rolled my eyes when I read that because you're the only one that's capable of killing me. So dramatic, so over the top. Of course it has to be, right? Like this is I mean it's fiction, but I was like it made me cringe a little bit. I was like, okay, yes, get your one-liner in there. But yeah, I do think it's some foreshadowing of what's to come. And no, I won't talk about my prediction yet, but
we'll save it.
Yeah, and then he even like pushes her to not hold back while they're sparring, right? And she is holding back because like her power is pretty much absolute. Like nobody matches up to her, even Xaden with his shadows. And so she knows that already, but she's unwilling to unleash that. And he needs her to. He needs her to know that she is his only insurance against the absolute worst case scenario. And she has to accept that. Like obviously we don't want it to happen. Like we want it to all end all nice in a pretty little package with a cute little bow on top and like it all ends perfectly for everybody. But we have to face facts that, this is a potential outcome and she has to be prepared for it. So
it's kind of like when Jon Snow was the one who had to kill Daenerys because he was the only one who could get close enough to her to kill her.
Listen, we don't mention the last season. We don't mention the last season. Like it's he who must not be named.
exactly.
Nobody else could kill her. Nobody else could kill Daenerys. She was such a badass. Like that's why she became the Mad Queen. She was overtaken not only by anger, but by power, right? And she burned everyone down. And the only one who could stop her was the love of her life who could get close enough.
Participating in this conversation.
Well, after
it makes me think, so like if we're gonna go on that tangent, it makes me think of that meme with Tyra Banks on Next Top Model, and she's like, we were all rooting for you, how dare you.
We were rooting for you.
Yeah.
I don't know where I've never seen that, but I can imagine Tyra Banks saying that because I have watched that show.
I remember watching that episode.
Yeah, in real time. Yeah. That's a core memory for me.
getting a date on myself, but yeah, I remember watching that as it aired. What did it used to come on? MTV? VH1?
Was it?
I feel like it came.
I think it was VH1.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I was obsessed with that show.
I was like, Tyra, why are you so angry?
Anyway, let's get back on track.
Let's move on. So Xaden leaves with like literally no word to anybody except his mental conversation he's having with Violet, right? And Sloane finally talks to Violet. Even for a second, she hasn't been able to face her ever since what happened with her mom and the ward stone and everything that happened with her death. But she grabs Violet, she takes her, saying that Jasenia has new tomes for her to read, only to come find out that Dane came through for her. So happy.
Yay.
I was so happy. And she was able to get her dad's research. I was obviously not shocked at all that it had a lock on it, but I was feeling the freaking frustration. Like, I can understand Violet was like, finally, I have more research. I have my dad's research. And then she's like, and it's locked.
Yeah, it's not that easy, obviously.
My reaction was the exact opposite. I was like, ooh, it's locked. This is like an escape room. I love this.
And I hate escape rooms. I've only done it once and I'll never do it again.
Always wanted to do an escape room. So there we go.
Not for me. Y'all can enjoy it. I'm not a riddle girl.
I'm not either. I'm very much like, I go for the obvious, which, I've been trying really hard not to do that. And honestly, books like Rebecca Yarros's book really has pushed me to think beyond the obvious. And so I love that. But when I did see it, when I saw that it had a code, I was like, oh my God, like what more things can Violet have to go through just to get more answers? Like, geez, man.
Right. So we have this 6-letter lock combination that is stopping Violet from getting this research that she so desperately seeks. And there's a cryptic message on it saying that the first love is irreplaceable. And speaking of obvious, I automatically, his first love, Lilith, that's 6 letters.
Obviously.
Boom, boom. And then I was like, but
So
I'm going to be really upset if that's the answer. And so I looked down and literally the next line is like, well, it's got to be Lilith. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's not Lilith.
Yeah.
But Violet knows her dad really well, and she knows that he wouldn't want her to pick the obvious answer. So she obviously cannot go with the obvious answer, which I love that. I love their relationship. Yeah. And I love that like these chapters are bringing more out of like how they used to be as father and daughter and just how much he prepared her. I mean, she is so smart and it's all because of him.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that the conversation starts coming up, of course, among the squad. Like, well, who was Mira's first love? Who was Brennan's first love? Violet, who was your first love?
Oh my God.
I thought that was such a clever way of introducing a new character.
Yes.
Because they talk about him and like speak of the devil, a couple of pages later, he shows up.
Yep.
And literally the devil.
They did mention him like back when was it? I think it was like at the end of chapter 6 or something. They mentioned that Halden was going to be part of the task force, and
because they needed
she had a strong reaction to that, but they didn't mention why. And then they bring it up here when they're talking about like first love. And then Eric was the one who brought up how many letters is the code? And she says 6. So, Halden fits. And he says, well, it fits. So that's like confirmation. So they did have a romantic past, Halden and Violet, And that's why she's been dreading him being part of this task force.
They only need him because they need a freaking royal representative, which I think is so dumb. But I love that Iron Flame had the whole confrontation between Kat and Violet, right? Which was Xaden's ex, and Violet feeling really, really jealous and just really hated Kat on sight. And of course, Kat hated her too, but for a different reason, not because she loves Xaden. But now I love that this book brings Violet's ex and we get to see Xaden jealous. And so their whole confrontation at the sparring mat, whenever Xaden was having one of his classes, Halden goes up to Violet and was like, did I ever say I was sorry? I'm so sorry for what I did. Oh, let me take you out to dinner. And then questioning all this. Is it true what people say about you and Xaden? And she like quickly, that I'm in love with him? Yes. It's like, yes, that's true.
Got that down real quick.
Yes.
So at this point, we haven't found out what exactly happened between them, but the way they're interacting is obvious. Like, it didn't end well. Violet was scorned somehow when this relationship ends. And oh my God, can we talk about how freaking annoying Halden is? Like, he's so cocky. He's such a prince, just like quintessential, just total fuckboy energy, and
Yes.
he uses his title, it's so gross. It gives me the ick instantly. So I hate this guy.
I mean, 100%. Like, he knew walking in, he was like, oh, I see Ryerson there. He knows that they've been together. I mean, everybody in the freaking
Yeah.
quadrant knows that Xaden and Violet are a thing. And he's still like, oh, let me take you out. And then tries to touch her.
Yes. So Xaden this whole time is using his shadows to like kind of listen in on their conversation. And he's obviously using his second signet to read his intentions. So that's probably also amplifying his emotions towards this guy because his intentions are probably not honorable, let's be honest, towards Xaden or towards Violet. So that was such a funny scene because like up until this point, Xaden has been such a guy who's in control of his emotions, of his actions, and he is just falling apart at this guy coming into Violet's life, posing a threat to him, which obviously he's no threat.
No, I think that, but I think it also goes back to the fact that like he wants right now, obviously, and nobody's questioning their love, right? Violet doesn't question his love, he doesn't question Violet's love, but the fact that they can't be physically intimate, I think is just killing him. And like seeing this space between Halden and Violet, and like Halden trying to be physically intimate, not really physically intimate, but he tries to touch her, right? And knowing that he can touch her without the fear of channeling, I think also kind of what drives some of that rage. So, I mean, hell, I think I would have done way worse than just knocking on his ass.
Yeah, well, it's sort of unnerving though, right? Like we can blame it on the fact that they haven't been able to be intimate, and there's obviously the separation between them that they can't overcome because of, the codex and stuff like that. But also it's giving a very animalistic sense of Xaden now. Like he's becoming a little bit more primal, and that's something that we don't really want to see. And it's what's the most unnerving about it is that it's not totally clear to Violet that she, or at least to us as the reader, that Violet is recognizing this for what it is, that she's very, if not eager, then she just overlooks it just because she doesn't want to believe what it could mean. Towards the end of this chapter, yes, we do have that funny moment right at the end, but also this chapter, starts out with the journal, right? The research that Violet desperately needs to get into. And ironically enough, the person's name that could have been the answer, Halden, he actually provides the answer in just a flippant remark that he made towards Violet, saying that anyone who's ever dated a writer knows their first their first love is their dragon. And so that kind of transitions us into the next chapter here.
Yeah, that makes it click for her, like first love, dragon.
Yep. So is her mom's dragon's name was the answer to the journal.
Exactly.
Man, and she just so desperately wanted to be right. Like I could feel the anxiety just pouring out of her whenever she sat with Ree and was like, I have to be right. I have to be right. And hoping that Ree could salvage maybe some of the liquid that would destroy it if she did get it wrong. But thankfully she was right. And, she goes back to the scenarium and they talk about where their mission is next. And it's definitely not north because she provides more information. And Halden being Halden, trying to get more of Violet on his side, obviously starts siding with her. And, he says, okay, we'll go to where you want to go, which is Deverelli.
But like the way he presented it, he didn't even think he did anything wrong, but he gave her a note that was written to her from Takaris.
Oh, yes.
That he had opened and read. And it was like nothing like, oh yeah, I opened that note. But anyway, I side with you. We should go south.
That's
just
right.
Totally skirting over that fact that he read her personal message. Jerk. I hate this guy.
Well, like you said, fuckboy energy, right? Fuckboys think they can do whatever they want and that,
Totally.
it's not going to matter and they don't care who they hurt along the way. He's just trying to get a rise out of Violet and a rise out of Xaden, I'm sure. But thankfully, at least, I mean, I hate to say it, that he is trying to earn favor with her, but because of that, they do end up going where they need to go. And so before they go to Deverelli, they have to go to another city where they have to get an item that Takaris is asking for, because Takaris is the one that's going to be helping them, with this meeting in Deverelli. So that's kind of where we end off here is their mission to go find this item.
All right, friends, that's the end of our deep dive conversation. Now we're going to discuss some of our predictions, final thoughts as we wrap up this episode. So I have an idea, right? That yes, Halden is annoying. Ugh, like he's this arrogant prince that, just because the way he comes off immediately and the way Xaden automatically comes in to defend Violet, like we get this sense mentally, subliminally, that he's not to be trusted. But I actually think that he'll become important later on, and just because of some things that may happen in the future of this book, I think he'll be important. My other prediction goes back to a previous prediction that I had, is that in this section, Dane really steps up to the plate to retrieving her father's research that she asked for, and he didn't turn it into his father, or that at least that we know of. I truly believe that he didn't, but I think that in and of itself is another foreshadowing moment that Dane is going to be crucial to the story later as we go on. So those are some of my predictions. What about y'all?
It's going to be an ongoing one for me, but just seeing Xaden's transformation, and the fact that he's like not losing control in a big way. He's still only channeling a little bit, but I just don't know where that leaves him. And we kind of talked about this during the, episode today. I don't know where that leaves him and Sigel. Like, yes, she's still trying to protect herself. And yes, he can still wield shadows, but will he still be able to do that? Because I still keep thinking about Jack and the fact that he was able to live without his dragon bond, because that once a dragon is dead, you're supposed to be dead too. So what does that mean? So I don't know. I really don't have as many final thoughts from this one. I'm curious as to what they're going to find in Deverelli. Like, is it going to be more questions, more answers? Is Violet going to see more of her father's research? I don't know.
I'm kind of with you, Jen. I feel like I still need to see more. Like my same predictions from the last couple episodes, I think still stand. And I think I've gathered more evidence to support my theory in these chapters. But I feel like there were some moments where they were trying to pose like the quest for the cure and the quest for the seventh breed to be like two separate missions, but I do think they're one and the same, even though like obviously the quest for the seventh is more specifically about raising more wards. I think that does have something to do with a possible cure. And then she even mentions when she's reading or when she finally gets a hold of her dad's research, like, oh, we're going to Deverelli specifically to try to find the seventh. But, my dad's research also mentions this other side quest, that possibly has to do with the cure. Who knows? Yeah. She's still kind of like seeing it as two separate things, but I think they're one and the same. So that's my little theory or prediction for this section.
I also think that the fact that Taryn is not very fond of Xaden, calling him the Dark One every time they talk about Xaden, I don't think that he's interested in a cure whatsoever. I think the only thing he cares about is Indarna and her kind and what that means for the rest of Navarre. Because not once have I picked up that he's excited or happy about the fact that she's trying to find a cure and that she is still sleeping in his bed, well, not anymore now that he's professor, but like that she's still in this relationship and still holding true to her feelings for him. So I wonder what that's going to be. I wonder what that means later on in the book, like how that's going to come into play as far as like how far he's willing to let Violet go when it comes to finding the cure.
All right. Well, those are our predictions. Let us know what you think of them. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have other predictions after this section of what could happen in the next section? We want to hear all of it. So be sure to tune in for our next episode that will feature chapters 19 to 24.
So next time on our Onyx Storm deep dive, secrets unravel, alliances are tested, and danger looms as Violet embarks on her mission to Deverelli. With her father's journal guiding the way, she seeks out a merchant who may hold the key to long-buried truths. But what she finds could change everything. Meanwhile, Xaden struggles to keep his shadows in check, and a heated confrontation threatens to expose more than just his power. And just when Violet thinks she's gaining control, a shocking betrayal reminds her that trust is the most dangerous weapon of all. Join us next episode as we break down chapters 19 through 24, because in this world, the truth is never what it seems.
That's a wrap for Books Between Friends today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next chapter.